All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:31.
All right.
Thanks everybody for being patient. We were on a fabulous tour of the building. Shauna's here to take minutes, so we're all set. At this time, is there any public comment? Yes.
Hi, I'm Tom Larmouth. I'm a Moncton resident, and I'm the president of the MAEA. A couple items. One is I wanted to inform the board of a protocol lapse that happened based on the March 11th meeting, in which I did not find out the result of the grievance. I was the grievance as the president of the MAEA, and I didn't find out the result of the grievance until Thursday in sort of a backwater channel. And I would just like to remind the board that it's very important that the grievant knows first rather than the public. So this, I actually was informed about this through public minutes. And it's much better if the grievant knows this first. That should be the accepted protocol. The other thing I wanted to bring to the board's attention is that in the minutes it says that the superintendent was directed to collaborate with the MAEA to find a solution by March 26, 2019, the next board meeting, and prepare to report the solution to the board. As the representative of the MAEA, I have not been contacted since the March 11th meeting. And so the MAEA has been unable to collaborate in any solution. And I just thought the board should know that. And my last item is a question. It says that there's going to be a report for the solution to this board, but I don't see that report in the agenda. So I'm wondering if I should stay because that report's going to happen. Could anyone answer that?
There will not be a report tonight. The board has not had further discussion, and so there may be a statement at some later date, but not tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other public comment? All right. We have some students who joined us tonight for a community council presentation, so I'll just let them take over from students and teachers and a teacher
And community member.
You can't do that.
And if Krista were here, perhaps Krista, but Krista's not here today. She's
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Over. Okay. So, yay. We're going to introduce ourselves and then talk about really an institution here that has lapsed this year, and we are in the process of revitalizing it. So we'll do a little history, we'll do a little invitations to the future, and hope that you all are as supporters for the community council as this body has been in the past. So thank you. I'm Ann Friedrichs.
I'm Betsy Rittner. I teach in the middle school here.
I'm Angelita Cristina Pena. I'm in 8th grade.
My name's Sean. I'm in 8th grade. I'm the clerk for the executive council. My name's Dustin. I'm 8th grade. I'm the treasurer for the community council.
I'm Martha Chesley, and I'm a community member that is interested in helping out with this.
And I'm Ann Friedrichs, a social studies teacher, and I had the privilege of working on the community council since the idea of democratic schools came to our district in 2007. So would you be really notice? So I'm going to go over a little bit of the history. This is actually our current seniors who are actually in the play and unable to be here tonight are pictured in that picture, if you want to go back one. Thank you. And Betsy and I are in that picture, and a few other community members and teachers. You might see some familiar people, but this was back just 6 years ago. And yet it goes further back to 2008 when we actually started this. So what we're doing here tonight is, yes, thank you. Which one of these students wants to say?
Sure. Well, we're looking for representatives for the MAUSD school board on the community on the community council. It's going to be hosted at the Mount Abraham High and Middle School Library on Monday starting April 1st, 2019. from 3 to 3:45. We're specifically looking for people, well, not specifically, but we want somebody from Starksboro to represent as well, because we're looking for somebody from that town.
So as I said, the planning started when everyone got on board that we needed a more democratic school, and I want to thank all of you for putting that high on your list of priorities. And also your connection with the community as you reached out to us at the high school and the students to be part of a community dialogue about the schools. That's what this is all about. And we want to revitalize it and make sure it functions completely and strong in order to make our high school a democratic school. This was by Paulette Bogan as principal, who said, yes, I want input from community, students, faculty, school board on the issues of the school that always are under debate, particularly about the student handbook, the student rules and regulations, how the students are feeling about their school, but we need the community to be there to discuss it too. So she put out this in 2007 saying, let's get started on this. And we worked for a year. And Halika, would you do the next one? And we developed a constitution which you can connect to on our school site. It's long, it's connected also there, and I will share it with Dawn, this particular program. And the purpose of this council is to make sure that all of our school affairs are consistent with school board policy and, of course, the state, and established by the superintendent of schools. It will serve as a link between the community, the students, the schools, the board, and the staff of the school. Make that a democratic process. So the authority for the community council is derived from you, and this was voted on by the entire community. I'll show you the results in just a minute. And it provides a structure for us to continue this process every week, all year long. As it says, it consisted with board policy. The council will serve to make decisions and make rules, and it is entitled to take action consistent with the policies and by, in conjunction with all of the different people. So the Constitution is thick, and we've tried to follow it very well. Sally Ober has helped us a great deal with our policies, a town clerk from Lincoln. She just had this, all of us retrained in Robert's Rules of Orders last week so that we can actually get started on the 1st and follow this. So we had 372 people from the community, the faculty, the administration, the board, and the students vote. We thought that was a pretty good turnout on this particular day. They even voted in town offices. And as you can see, the overwhelming majority said, yes, go ahead, do this, way back in 2008.
So one of the best things about this is that it's really a collaborative group of people from ages 7th grade all the way up to however old people want to be, you know, and join from the community. And so you can sort of see the representation. And the picture you saw was when we had a pretty full representation, and then unfortunately it kind of lapsed a little bit. And so it's really exciting. These guys have been really very excited and willing to help us get this started. So you can see that there's 4 representatives from each grade up to, you know, 4 representatives. School staff representatives, and that is, you know, by our departments, but it's also, we also have, we've got Carol from the kitchen who's always been a part. It's nice to have somebody from the kitchen. We usually have custodians. So it's a really diverse group of school staff representations. We will have an administrator there, community representatives. So we've got Martha, and who else we've got? Sally Ober and Terry Fitzgerald, and so we're looking for, a few others. We've got our school board representative, who is Krista, I believe, right?
Yes.
From you guys, and then there's also at-large representatives, so you can also, if you come to 4 meetings, you can become a voting member. And we have our school board representatives and alternatives, and that really, so I think, have they started meeting yet? That was.
They have, but she had to leave at 6 today. So Bella has been with you, I hope, and Carly is trying to, but she's busy tonight with softball. She should be here at 7.
So, if you notice, if you really kind of add this all up, really students can be the majority of this council. And I think some people were really worried about that in the beginning, because it is a decision-making council. But it's just been really impressive to see what goes on there and to see the discussions, the rich discussions that happen. And, so it's been a great thing. And I think that we're very excited to get this going again.
Yeah, proposals, I think, is the next one. We're missing a slide, I think, but please go on the proposals next. Yeah, this is it.
So we have a proposal thing. It's a form that you can fill out. It's in the office and it's on the Mount Abe website. You can fill it out, and if you want something to change about the school, that's what you would write about. Or think about a longer lunchtime, because our lunchtime is about 25 minutes. And you can also change say you don't like this about the phone rule, like you can't use your phone during class or something. And you can change a lot of things about it. And it does go through us. And then what else does it go through?
I'll explain that in just a minute, although we're missing the slide. I think the slide is actually missing on it, but you're going to click on the council at the top, community council form. So, yeah, this is the form that is filled out by anyone. And right now, we probably have 6 proposals waiting to be dealt with by the community council. So people have been making proposals, but we haven't had the representatives there yet and the ability to get started. So that's what's going to happen. April 1st, we'll start getting that organized. Now, can you leave it right there for a second? In that these proposals go to the executive committee. The executive committee is the administrator, a faculty member, the student leaders of the community council, and they look through the proposal and they say, oh, this is about curriculum. It goes to the teacher leaders group. Oh, this one is about safety. This is definitely about health issues within the school. It is going to the administrative team. This one is about student schedules. It is about meaning the student's day. It is about assemblies. It is about our student handbook. It needs to go to the community council. So the executive committee is a place where all sorts of proposals can come in, but then it is sent to the particular leadership group in order to make that democratic decision with the leaders of the school.
Okay, so quick reminder, since this is the end, we are having another kind of everyone comes and visits meeting April 1st. It is in the library, which I believe you guys have seen, and it starts at 3 and it goes to 3:30. So you're welcome to come. Bring someone else with you. Oh, 45. Oh, 3:45, sorry. Yeah, so that's it.
And there's a little bit over in the corner. We have had this issue, and one of the reasons that we've had a hard time getting our student leaders in the school there is because our athletes always thought they had to be at practice at 3 o'clock. So there has been a rule since the beginning, and it's now the new athletic director has has agreed to this also. Hopefully we're getting the word out to the coaches that a pass can be given to any athlete who goes to this until 3:30, and they will not be penalized in terms of having come late to practice. And that's a key piece to make sure our leaders on the sport teams are also heard here.
And one of the other things that I think is going to be really exciting and helpful once we get this started again is that we have got a fit block now, and we have advisories. So the fit block is the flexible instructional time. So every student has that. And also in our advisories, we've really been working hard to do these circle days, which are really sort of very, kind of structured discussions. And so that, one of the problems that we've always had is how do we get the word out? How do the students get the word out to their constituents? And so students have really, I think we've got a place and we're ready now to be able to take something, take some of these proposals and then bring them back, and so that it is really a representative democracy.
So thank you for bringing democracy to our school, keeping it going, and coming. If you want to come April 1st at 3 o'clock, it'll be a jumble of people, we hope. And Kim just said that she would represent New Haven. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Do you have any questions? Yeah.
Is every proposal discussed and considered and voted on, or does the executive committee kind of send it to streamline and say, we've seen this 20 times? And
There is a rule about if something can come back after it's already been talked about. We've had things go on forever as people. I would like you to know that the dress code is, whoa, how many years was that?
Mine got to my God.
So if it's the same thing, it will say you can, actually proposals that you don't like the decision on by the community council are taken to the superintendent. So that is where the next step is. And it's in the Constitution, and it says that. But the idea is that we have put it into the right group to make the decision.
right.
And then, yes, we'll take them all. And we have to, this is another rule that I think is so helpful for all of us getting involved. We cannot hear a proposal and vote on it that day. We have to hear the proposal, go back to our constituents, and then the first time we might be able to vote on it, if everybody's ready to vote, is the second time that we've discussed it. So we have to discuss it 2 times, and then someone can move to vote on the issue. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Before we go any further, I added something to the agenda and forgot to tell you right at the start of the meeting, so my apologies. But I added an item to the consent agenda to approve an unpaid leave request for Anthony Swift. And then I also added an executive session, one more letter to the list, and it's E, and it's pending litigation is another topic to discuss in the executive session. Pending and probable litigation. So I apologize for not doing that right after I called to order. My mind was elsewhere. Yeah, we're going to just take action. Yeah. Next is we have a couple more board reorganization tasks to take care of. To appoint a community member rep to the Hannaford Career Center. And our current community member rep is Kim Farnham, who's here in the audience. She currently attends the meetings on behalf of our community. So I don't know if you want to say anything. You're welcome to.
I've been in that position probably, I would say 8 years off and on. Took a little rest and then was recruited again. But absolutely love the school. Doing some really exciting things down there. I talked about it a little bit at the community forum at Bristol Elementary School last weekend. And it's near and dear to my heart. My kids had a chance to go there, and had very successful outcomes and just very happy. And Allison can also speak to that. I didn't know you were going to wear the same color. Thank you. Anyway, but it's kind of Hannaford color. But anyway, great school. If you have any questions about what we're doing down there, I'm sure Allison contributes a report to you guys regularly as much as she can, because we're moving pretty fast down there. There's a lot of things, a lot of adult education programs also that are being reintroduced. Construction is one of them, and we just had support, because we also include business members on our board. And so we get a really good community input about, this is what we need out there, industry support, and putting together a construction major. We're getting ready to hire somebody, but at the same time, it's very STEM oriented. So there'll be some introduction to plumbing and electrical and all the other pieces that are important out there in construction. And I think it's full. It's already full. So those are exciting things. The other piece that we worked on, the administrators worked on, actually was scheduling, because that seemed to be the biggest obstacle at this institution about how to get people enrolled down there. And initially it was always a conversation about the busing and all of that, but it was actually about the schedule. And Virgins, Middlebury, and Mount A were all on the same schedule, and our enrollment projections already are doubled for Mount A. So, and I contributed to that. And also just public information and a lot of press. We had 400 people at our open house. And yes, there were other things going on. There was a maker fair that was going on. There was a repair piece for appliances and different things like that was going on in another section of the school. But the nice part about it was there were people from Bristol and so on that I hadn't seen for a while because I live in New Haven, and said I had never been in this building. And I was so excited to see what was going on. And yes, it was just before the budget was voted on, which was helpful. But again, it got people in the door, and I think that was the premise of what we're doing. And there's a maker fair that's every Thursday evening down there, and people bring in what they're doing, and some of them have started mentoring with the classes, which is really nice. There's a woman down there doing a lot of costume work and stuff for the drama department. But just a great institution. And if you have any questions, again, Allison or myself can answer those. I'm not sure if you're still going to do that. I'm assuming that you still would like to be the rep down
She was appointed at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you.
She's good.
Thanks for doing that. Thank you.
Allison, you sent out an email to everybody with your the report on the update.
Actually, I just sent it to you.
Oh, sorry.
But that's okay, because I thought about it, and it'll be fine for the next meeting.
Okay, so we'll put that the Hannaford update at the next meeting. Okay. All right, so Kim is willing. We just need a motion to appoint.
So moved.
All right, so that's
Second.
Sarah and Andrew. All those in favor of appointing Kim Farnham as our community member representative to the Hannaford Career Center, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Any abstentions?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So our next item is to appoint a board member as the VSBA delegate for the statewide insurance vote. And normally we would make the motion and have a discussion, but since it requires a little pre-knowledge to make the motion, I'm going to allow for a little discussion and then a motion. Typically, we have a representative who votes for us at the meeting at Lake Maury for VSBIT and VSBA. And we need to figure out who that's going to be before the end of April. The VSBA needs to know, maybe it's the beginning of April. We need to know soon. So in the past, we had Mary Kate go because she was already going, and I think Sarah went for us last time because
Krista.
And Krista. So I don't know if you're still interested in taking on that role.
I'm on the VSBA board now, so I don't want to.
Mary Kate used to do it for us when she was on the VSBA board as well, so.
I think nice try is what she was saying.
Okay, so what does it entail?
I think mostly what it entails is casting a vote for us at that meeting.
Okay, yes.
No,
I'm willing.
I don't think it's any more than that, but I haven't attended that meeting in a couple of years to see it, but I don't think it's any more than casting a vote.
Now, was this something where if we didn't attend, we were able to ask them to vote for us by proxy?
So I have in the past acted as proxy for multiple boards because we weren't unified at the time.
Right. I just remember that discussion coming up in the past.
Yeah.
I'll move to appoint Sarah.
All right, Steve Rooney moves to appoint Sarah as the VSBA delegate for the statewide health insurance vote. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Elizabeth?
Who's that?
Elizabeth Rada.
In gratitude.
Elizabeth Rada.
Rada.
R-A-T-T-A. All right. All those in favor of appointing Sarah McLean as our rep, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. So next, we're moving on down to the consent agenda, which consists of items A through I. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Andrew? And is there a second?
Second.
Kristen? All right. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Now, moving on down to executive limitations, we're update on the financial report. It's in the packet. Are there any questions?
How are we doing on healthcare?
That's a question we'll be asking for a little while longer.
I was just curious how much closer we were to.
Howard can fill in the details, but I don't think we're a whole lot closer now. I think we're feeling confident we budgeted sufficient money. The question is how much of what we think we're going to have left will remain by the end of the period. We're thinking end of summer at the earliest before it's all cleaned up, right, Howard?
Well, they basically hired a reconciler to try to help people reconcile their accounts, and that's been the problem with this. So hopefully if the reconciler can get through it, but you're talking about a lot of accounts, thousands of accounts, and I don't have any hope that it'll be done before the fall. But we'll see.
Thank you. Kristen?
How's that affecting people? Is that the FSA thing from the year before and all that?
It is. That's what's still sort of being cleaned up from, really I think still from, I don't remember the name. Who was our first carrier? Who was the first third party?
Future
Planning, right. So I think they're still even cleaning up some of the future planning stuff. There are definitely still people impacted. I've had meetings with union leadership about, should people find themselves in real hardship, they're to communicate directly with me. And then because each circumstance could be very different, we'll do what we can on our end to work with the individual that's impacted to figure out a solution forward. Recognizing we have to abide by tax laws and things like that, but potential for interest-free loans, like we'll explore whatever we can legally explore to support them through the end of this year. So because we can't really cross the fiscal year boundary, so anything that we would do to help would have to be sort of reconciled back by the end of this year. But so I've communicated that with the union reps, and they know that we're interested in helping for folks that need help.
Is there any legal implications for that entity for this mess?
I believe there are either current lawsuits or pending lawsuits that are working to address some of this. We're not involved in any of those at this point.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the financial report?
Howard, you explained how we were headed into the red with the food service last time, and I can't remember what that explanation was.
Well, it's sort of born red, but what I did is I brought Kathy Alexander, our esteemed director of food services, with us, and she can explain some of those financial things that we're hung up on at this point. So.
Okay.
Hi, how are you? Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I'll be brief, as brief as I can be. You don't mind if I stand up, do you?
No.
Okay, cool. Hi, my name's Kathy Alexander. I haven't met some of you, but I do see a bunch of familiar faces. So yes, we're in a deficit situation at the moment. It's a tough spot to be in, and I'll try to explain some of it. As you know, school nutrition is in general just really complex because as our school budgets in general. We have federal funding, we expect money from families, but often families can't pay. We have trouble collecting funds. We have staff that are part of our schools. We can't, set pricing based on what we pay staff. So it's complicated. But having said that, I'll just point out a couple of specific things that I think are contributing to the current deficit. First of all, revenue is clearly one of the most important aspects of running our food service department, our child nutrition department. And this year, overall anticipated revenue from meal sales is down. So we're looking at those numbers going down. And I have some specifics if you're interested in that, but I'll keep moving, and if you want specific numbers.
But just generally, it's being underutilized?
Generally, the numbers of meals are down, not hugely, but enough to make an impact. And some of it has to do with the fact that the students who qualify for free and reduced meals has also dropped somewhat significantly in some of our schools. And that's where the greatest amount of revenue comes from. So we, for every meal that's sold, we get $3.79 from the federal government for a student who qualifies for either free or reduced meals. And right now, those numbers have dropped to it adds up to about $2,300 a month less than last year in just revenue from students who would have qualified for free and reduced meals. So we look at that really carefully every month. We look at all the student participation, and we look at students who are classified as paid students and students who are classified free and reduced, and we try to figure out why those numbers aren't up. And they're about 70% of those students are participating in meals, but the number overall is down. We also always wonder why that number is down, but we're seeing that statewide, the number of families that qualify for SNAP benefits is also down. So that helps me feel a little better about the fact that we are actually reaching people, but I think people just aren't qualifying for the free and reduced meals. So it makes a significant difference when that number goes down. We don't get the revenue from the federal government, and our pricing isn't the same. It's a little bit less. So that's number one. Overall sales are down as well, not significantly, but about 2% overall. And Howard and I have looked at it very carefully. It could have to do with the fact that we increased prices last year. So you never know. We increased prices by 20 cents, which was hefty, but because it adds up. And we already have families who can't afford to pay. So we seem to have families that are right on the edge. Even though they don't qualify for benefits, they still have trouble paying. So we don't know, but overall sales are a bit down. And in general, enrollment's down, so we're going to have less kids participating in meals. This is what's complicated, but the percentage of meals, and I feel it's important to know this, the percentage of meals relative to enrollment, though, is still high, and it's actually higher than it was last year by a couple of percentage points. So we still have schools lunch programs that are, we have 70% participation in 2 or 3 of our schools. Our high school has 63% participation. Last month it was 65. Those are really, really high levels of participation in general, but the numbers are down, so the overall numbers. And our after-school numbers are also down. So revenue is a big piece of this picture. We do certain things to try to boost revenue. We cater to preschools, and that's really increased this year. We had about a $7,000 increase in our catering because we're vending to an additional preschool this year. So that's how we try to make up for it, but we still struggle. So I want to just point out a couple things. Other factors that influence participation are the price. We talked about that, the price of meals, schedules, the fact that there's half days every month. That impacts our program because we do serve a bag lunch in most schools. And it's just not as appealing to kids. So, and they're getting ready to go home and have lunch. So we have one day a month where we know our sales are going to be shorter than they would be. Timing of meals relative to breakfast and snack that we serve, when the lunch period is, how long lunch periods are. These are all things that really do affect overall performance in our program. Field trips, all of that. And certainly menus too. We really feel like we work really, really hard on the menus. But we look at it all the time. What can we do better with our menus so that we can really appeal to kids? This year we also had the district contribution was cut by $20,000, excuse me. So I understand that may be put back, but I don't know at this point. It was put back. Okay, great. So it was that went from a 16% of our overall revenue to 14%, and now it's back. So just historically, we started out at about 20% of our revenue was contributed to the program by the district or by the individual schools at that time. So we're steadily decreasing that, and to be honest, that is not something we can sustain. We need the support in our program. Our a la carte sales are down this year when we look at the budget, but I don't really care about that because I'm here to sell meals, not potato chips to kids. So they are down, and we see that. It's a couple $1,000s, but it contributes to the overall picture. It's not something I'm going to run around and try to fix, to be honest. We're benefiting, let's see, what did I say here? Okay. I wanted to say that we're benefiting from the revenue from the Addison Northwest District. So I work for both districts, and they're paying 50% of my salary, as you all know this, and my assistant's salary. So I think we're definitely benefiting from that. It's a big line item in our budget, and it's additional revenue that we can count on. So we still benefit from that. On the positive note, while our food costs are definitely up, we also are benefiting from a very high rebate from our vendor because we consolidated and have all our schools together, and we spend a bunch of money there. So we have about a $7,000 increase in that. So that's the picture on the revenue side, and overall it's about meals and numbers of meals. On the expense side, which we have a little more control over, we see about a $20,000 increase in health insurance. I don't have any control over that, actually. I have control over some of the expenses, but not that one. So that's huge. $20,000 is huge, and that is what it is today. So I think it'll probably end up there.
Family plan is going to hit the
yeah. So that's where we're at today, is about $20,000 over what we anticipated just in healthcare costs. We also have seen an increase in staff time and wages. So the wages I don't have any control over because that's dictated by the contract. Staff time is something we can look at. We do look at meals per labor hour and try to ensure that all of our staff and our programs are as efficient and productive as possible. But it's not the kind of thing I can change midstream. But we'll certainly be looking at that now to plan for next year. So with regard to the meals that we're serving, how much staff time do we need? And are we being as efficient and productive in each of our kitchens as we can be? So we'll look at that for sure. Our food costs are higher right at the moment. The budget's about $20,000 over what it was last year at this time. I'm not too worried about it because we have USDA foods that are in a sort of free category for us that we haven't used up yet. We'll be using a lot of that towards the end of the year. But it's still something that I want you to know about. It's over what it was last year, and we're going to have to really work with that in the next 3 months to see if we can bridge that gap. I feel confident that we can, but it does take some work. We took a big hit this year in repair and maintenance. We have a $15,000 budget, and by November we spent $17,000. That's equipment that refrigeration that went bad. Bristol, Robinson, we had some schools that had some serious issues, and there was just no way around it. So we are over budget in that area pretty significantly, and we have bills that have to get paid in the repair, so that'll be a problem this year. We also had money that was in our budget for negotiations that we did not anticipate. So in summary, we're working to turn it around, but this is sort of the overall picture of the different moving parts that I'm trying to reconcile to maybe make that gap a little smaller. Right now, it's an $83,000 deficit, which I don't even like saying. We had 3 years. I will say we had 3 years where we were operating in the black. It was really great. I can't necessarily explain it. These things happen. Our programs are kind of impossible to run because we're running a business in a school with kids and families. So I can't set pricing to make up this deficit. But we can do what we can do, and I assure you that we're really working on it. I also want you to know that our food quality is really high, and we're paying lots of attention to the health and well-being of students. And I know maybe that doesn't equal an $83,000 deficit, but I think it's really, really important. Our quality of our staff is also really high, their commitment, their training, and their professionalism. So I think to the extent that that's important, I want to mention it. So despite the financial downturn at the moment, the program is very well run and solid, and I continue to be really proud of the work that we're doing, and we are going to work on fixing it
And we're also
to the extent we can.
About 6 years ago is when this went in place, not completely, but 5 years ago it was completely in place. So I have all the data for that 5 years, and I'm looking at every line, revenue and expense, to see what could have happened this year. It just seems like this year has been a turmoil year.
Yeah, we had a tough year.
And it was difficult.
Thank you for the explanation.
You're welcome. Kevin.
The 83,000, what percent of your total budget is that?
Oh, so that's a good question. 83,000, well, it's $1.1 million budget. Howard's really good at math, quick math, so.
About 8-10%.
Yeah, and you're, right now, the contribution is the contribution for the school board is about $195,000. With this deficit, it would be 250, if we ended the year with that and the board had to make up for it, it would look like 250, which is about 20%.
I have one more question. It might be kind of off the wall, but can you talk a little bit about use of local products and that sort of thing?
Try to use as much local products as we can. This is a tough time right now, of course, but we have we're buying a lot of local beef. That's one area in the last couple of years we've put some energy into that. We buy beef from Harvey Smith in New Haven. We get a good price. There have been times this year, in fact, where it was cheaper than our vendor price. We have procurement process that we have to go through. So in the next month or so, we'll be sending bids out to local farmers in Addison County. It's been about 15% of our food budget. Between 13 and 15% of our food budget has gone to Addison County farmers. So when I say local, I mean right here. And then we also buy cabbage, from our vendor, we're buying from other local producers, Cabot being the biggest one.
Is that being impacted, or do you feel is it impacted?
No, because honestly, I think there's a couple of things that we've been able to do is maintain that and use our USDA foods and commodities to kind of counteract the small additional expense. So I think food prices are high, whether it's local or not local. So we're seeing really high prices, especially in produce at our vendor. So buying local is not, in my mind, a big burden, especially when it's a small percentage that we can make up with the free USDA foods that we get at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Kristen.
I remember that the amount that used to go in was 20% from the board, so we're sort of back to that. So, I mean, it was decreasing over the years, probably, as Howard said. I think it started at 20%.
It started at 20%. I mean, it was less money back then because our overall budget was less, but wasn't a lot less, but it was less than 250,000. But we started at 20% and it dropped down to almost 14. 14.7, I think, was the goal this year, but I don't, you know.
And I encourage people to come over during the day when you're here, is to get a lunch here and you'll be able to see the quality of the food that Kathy and her staff put out.
We also just started an Instagram account. My kids finally talked me into it, my adult children. But it is a great way to see what's happening. So we're posting pictures of school meals every day from school. The managers are sending me pictures. So our account is, it just started about 2 weeks ago, our account is Great School Foods, Great School Meals. I have some posters up here. Great School Meals. And you'll see what's happening in schools. I'm trying to post 3 or 4, you know, pictures of the actual meal or activities. Last week we had pictures of Vanessa making pizza at Bristol and stuff like that. So, yeah. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathy. All right. Okay. Are there any other financial report questions? Okay, we'll move down to an update on the strategic plan.
I'm getting my Great School Meals Instagram added.
Great.
Follow.
Great
There we go.
school meals.
That's good. Now following, Kathy.
You're up to 16 followers, Kathy. I just followed you.
17. You should get a meal per follower, like that. It should translate into something. So, strategic plan update is we are very near something that is finished, and I'll ask Dawn. Krista's also on the steering committee, but she's not here tonight. Chime in at any point. But we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week. They're blending together a little bit, where we saw sort of a draft of the strategic plan. We saw a draft logo as well. We sort of landed on the logo that we want, so that'll be unveiled as we roll out the strategic plan. There are a few sort of finishing details that we needed to pull together, looking for some pictures of sort of students and activities within the schools, working on a narrative piece, so sort of parts and pieces to complement the sort of depth and the meat of the plan. And we should be looking at our final draft, hopefully, the week of April 8th. So we are getting very close. There's a lot of work happening with our priority areas identified, starting to really get together a plan for how to, really how to organize ourselves to act on those goal areas, and then also thinking about what's the work involved in getting that going. So some real forward momentum, nearly 3 years in the making. It's exciting for it to be coming to a head here.
Any questions?
So we're going to have a formal presentation of that after that final draft?
You bet.
With cake.
That has to be cake.
All right. Our next item is an action item, and it's 2 monitoring reports, so I'm going to take them one at a time. So our first action is to accept the monitoring reports for 2.7 compensation and benefits. Included in the packet was a worksheet where you could fill in your comments if you had comments about the prepared report. So if we make a motion, then we'll have a chance to talk about what you wrote down.
So moved.
Allison? All right, is there a second?
Second.
Steve? All right. In regards to 2.7, do you have any comments? Any comments on your worksheet that you want me to know about, that you want included on the official response? Kevin?
So there's a discussion in 2.7.4 about non-compliance with the single-year contract. proposing to go to multi-year contracts.
Right.
Is there a legal restriction as to why there's written one certain year based on voters that are only funding budgets on an annual basis?
I don't know that, I'm not aware of any legal reason why that can't happen. I think it was more of a practical approach, recognizing that, what level of commitment can we make to somebody 2 years from now, knowing we only have a budget for next year. So I think that was more the impetus for that language in the policy. The challenge being, my guess is vendors like Betcha aren't interested in a one-year contract where they're going to have to invest who knows how much money in buses to abide by that contract and not have any means of feeling like they'll be able to recoup that. I'm also thinking about, this connects to the central office conversation, the significant cost fit up to make central office what it needed to be when we moved into the location we're in now. We had to sign a 10-year lease, so we had to make an agreement with the person providing that space for us, and they needed to recoup their investment, so they wouldn't entertain a 1 year. So some of the practical things get in the way with that.
I understand all that, and I'm not saying that there doesn't need to be that commitment, but I'm just trying to balance that the budget is voted. In theory, if the budget's never voted on again next year, there's no funding to do those things. So maybe a flip side of that is you go through an annual contract that's automatically renewed for X number of years or something, as opposed to having a 3-year contract. But I mean, there's a couple different ways you do it. And I just wondered about the legality of committing taxpayer money past the current budget.
Kristen?
If the budget isn't passed in a given year, which occurred a few times a few years ago, then after a certain date, if it doesn't get approved by the voters, then most of that previous year's budget goes forward legally by the state. So it's not like we wouldn't have any money if the budget's voted down. So most of that money moves forward into the next year, even if the voters don't approve it, because the state sees that you can't do that. You can't all of a sudden have no money. So
86%, I think?
87%.
So contracts would still mostly be able to be
Covered.
Right.
And there's a relatively small number of multi-year contracts, but it tends to be some of those bigger ones where there's significant upfront costs in being able to sort of honor the contract that they need to be assured they'll recoup. So plowing sometimes is that, so if somebody had to invest in equipment to be able to remove snow. I mentioned the lease agreement, busing.
We don't have that many.
Yeah, I can't think of any others offhand, but those are the big ones.
No, we tried to limit it down.
Some of them are big ticket items. I mean, 900,000 for transportation annually, so it's only one, but it's a big one.
So would you put in a certain amount of filters or something so it just doesn't get abused? I'm just saying, this is a policy thing. It needs to be legal. It needs to be set up in such a way that it is enforceable is the right word, but can be dealt with and not abused in the future.
Right. So how do we allow those multi-year contracts to happen, recognizing they're a necessity, and frankly they're happening now, and I don't see a way for them not to happen, but put some controls in place that it's not, you can't make multi-year contracts with just anybody.
I'm not arguing that we shouldn't have multi-year contracts. I'm just concerned about the way that gets set up, that it just doesn't end up being a big can of worms.
Yeah.
So I think we have an action item to actually talk about that directly, right?
Right, there is language change for 2.7.
So we can talk about options on how to deal with it then. Right.
So I was going to ask about that. What would be the process that we would need to undergo to look at the policy and try and implement some language change in it? We don't want to do a year-long process, and being just maybe one policy, we could do it a lot faster than.
Right. So typically there'd be a recommendation for some language, and then we'd go into the process of a policy, if we posted a policy and that sort of schedule. Interestingly enough, the Policy Governance Committee talked about this when they had formed. That was one of their, and I really thought we had addressed it, kind of thing, but when we went back and looked for it, we couldn't find that the language actually made it, and maybe it did and we're just not tracking it back. But so they actually came to that agreement when they were out to the 6 or 7 local boards that, yeah, we need to change that language. And I think it was as simple as adding language without board approval, kind of thing. But I think that's what they were coming around to then, so.
Yeah, and I think sort of what I'm hoping for in tonight's conversation is to get a sense of, you know, like you just shared your thoughts, Kevin, about concerns and restrictions, and so getting a sense from the board kind of what your thoughts are relative to the language change. We can then sort of seek legal advice. That gives me some information to work with to come back with a recommendation for language change at a future meeting.
Any other?
So how do we direct the superintendent to provide us with some language change?
So when we get to our board management item E, I would guess that we're going to make a motion to change the language in 2.7 and ask Patrick to come back with a recommendation and check with legal counsel.
And that'd be a good place just to confirm the particulars that the board wants to see in that language change.
Through the discussion. Elizabeth?
And then does this also interact with the policy about it not being able to be over $15,000? A single, is that?
It doesn't. No, I don't think that necessarily
Separate.
connects here. Yeah.
I think that's separate. Okay. Does anyone have any other comments they want recorded on the response form? I'm not going to record yours because I think they were just questions and clarifications, but I don't.
I'll give you my worksheet.
Okay, I'll put it. I can have it put in the board minutes. All right. So, so based on the information provided, does the board find that the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable? Yes. Does the data demonstrate the accomplishment of this interpretation? All right. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the monitoring report for 2.7 compensation and benefits, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, next is to accept the monitoring report for 2.8 communication and support to the board. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Andrew? Is there a second?
Second.
Allison? Any discussion? Sarah?
On 3, neglect to submit unbiased decision information required periodically by the board, or let the board be unaware of relevant trends. I don't know if this is the appropriate place to ask this, but it seems that when our legal representation for the board is actually legal representation that advocates the administration's point of view, and so it just doesn't seem unbiased. I'm talking more specifically like in a grievance procedure, that it seems like the legal counsel is advocating for the administration's perspective. So it just doesn't seem totally unbiased.
Allison?
Take a crack at responding to that possibly. I think legal counsel is giving us information based on the administration's interpretation of what they think we want legal counsel to do. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? It's kind of a circuitous route. And we have the option of taking it or not, but we also are very limited in terms of who we can get for legal counsel as well.
Right.
So I think our limited choices.
Well, I also think that that board counsel is really thinking about the organization, what's best for our schools. I realize I hold a little more knowledge from having more experience with them, but I wouldn't agree with the bias piece, because in general what I've seen from them most of, if not all of the time, is they're looking at what's best for the school. And, you know, I think the board has the option to hear both things, but we have to think about what our role is when we're, especially in a grievance, you know, it's very specific what our role is in a grievance. So I think their advice is usually it's about what's best for the organization kind of thing. I wouldn't necessarily think that that's just my opinion in what I've dealt with, that it's more biased.
All right. And then I have another question on 4. It's 5, where it says, in the superintendent's interpretation, it says, if an individual matter of the infraction is of the entire board, it shall be brought to the attention of the board chair. If the infraction involves a board chair, the chair of the supervisory union board shall be notified. We don't have that safety net or that extra step for one board.
Right. So since that's in the interpretation, that can still be something that is removed through your next report. You can definitely remove the supervisory union reference, and I can just add that to remove the language about the supervisory union.
That's one of those things that's holdover from when we weren't a merged board that we didn't catch.
And it raises the question, what is the organization then, or is there? And what it could have been argued, so if the infraction was against the supervisory union board chair at the time under this language, the same sort of lack of clarity on where to go from there existed. So I don't think that's necessarily new. So it might be as simple as striking the last sentence in the interpretation.
In the back of my head, though, remember the conversation that we learned that there is, in fact, still a supervisory union in effect, so maybe there's a language piece that board council would have to.
We do still exist as a supervisory union for very few purposes, but that's still technically in existence. We are not required to, nor do we have a supervisory union board in addition to this board, which I will say is a great thing. I'm not advocating that we add another board. That complicates how we operate. But even though it is true that we are still a supervisory union, there isn't an entity to go to should I be calling Dawn out on her behavior as board chair for the MAUSD board, as is required under this policy.
But under our policy, though, I have policy that governs what I do. So, in theory, if Patrick had a violation to cite to me when we came round or to the board chair roles, that would be the place that, as a servant of the board, you could then provide that feedback to me and direction. So there is sort of a safety net.
Is there a vice chair on this board?
There is.
Previously, okay.
Krista is. So, Kevin.
So I have a few of them. They're pretty much comments. 2.8.4 talks about paper and television media, but it doesn't talk about internet and social media, which becomes in a lot of aspects as important, maybe even more important. And I agree with Sarah on 2.8.5, and then in 2.8.6, which talks about unnecessarily complex or lengthy, all that kind of stuff. One of the examples is the budget presentation. I just want to make note that the budget presentation didn't go very well at the annual meeting, so I don't know if that was a great example or not.
Yeah, I wasn't there for that, but I did get some feedback from folks at town meeting about that as well. Some good constructive feedback, I thought. So I thought it might be worth a future session to kind of look at how that was formulated and what we might do to improve that.
That it was unnecessarily complex?
No, that it was unnecessarily not complex enough. Like it had been a little bit watered down to the point where they didn't feel it was transparent enough.
Right. I absolutely agree with that. It seems like I don't know how the process can shift as far as the budget presentation, but it seems like something else needs to happen. There needs to be an additional step in the process. I thought that would be like 3, the evidence for 3 as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. I guess, seems like that should be noted in the comments, so I'll note that in the comments. I'm not, okay, I'll just note it in the comment.
I mean, it's the board's report,
Right,
so it's sort of our work to
right.
direct Patrick on how it should be improved, I think.
I do think that we've had some conversations sort of in-house of thinking about, hearing what people are saying and wanting more detail and wanting to think about the level of detail that's useful and meaningful and offers more than what folks received this year, because we definitely heard from folks that they wanted more. But also trying to weigh that with, so we are required by the state to code dollars by school. I think there's danger in sharing a budget broadly that has a dollar amount allotted per school, because it puts us into well, how come that school got this much and this school got that much? And there's so many variables that we shouldn't even be paying attention to when we're looking just at total dollars. Like the school that has a more veteran staff, even though it's not more staff, is going to end up having more dollars in the bottom. I think that it puts us in a really tricky space. So it's trying to think about, so knowing that's the level of detail we could provide, and there are problems in providing that level of detail that we'll have to be prepared to react to should they present themselves, which I am confident they would. Or we need to think about what's a level of detail that doesn't go that far, that provides enough information that people can understand, and recognizing what people are going to want to do is look at sort of this line last year to this line this year, and with account code structure changes, merging 7 budgets into 1, and on top of that, the other shifts that happen on a routine basis, how to do that in a way that people can make heads and tails of it.
Well, and frankly, I'd like to see that report myself.
Sure.
That version that, is palatable without being overburdensome and doesn't necessarily focus on a building. It focuses on educational priorities.
So I think that'll be a great conversation to talk about.
Right.
How do we want this budget organized? There's a lot of different ways we could do it.
Kristen?
And there's a lot of merged boards now, so could we take a look at how other boards are doing it? And is there a school board association recommendation? Is there a, whatever your
Superintendent's Association.
Superintendent's Association, do they have guidance on that? I mean, it seems like I was off the board for a year, but even being at the community engagement thing, it seems like people are spinning wheels and trying to reinvent the wheel, and maybe there's a good model out there that we can use, that we don't have to spend hours and hours researching or looking at if something already exists.
And admittedly, I don't know if I should be poking around, but I looked at CBU's annual report and I looked at my alma mater in Pittsburgh, which is obviously very different, but they had a good, more, but not every school, not that in depth, but just more info on I don't know, busing category and whatever. There's just a little more meat to it that, not that you wouldn't necessarily be poking around, but that's what I did. So it was helpful for me because I was oh yeah, that's what I would like to see.
So that would be a good exercise for us to think about our community values and connecting them to the information as we go next year and start through the budget process. To really be thinking about what we've heard our communities value, and then having the conversation so that as it's prepared, Patrick knows what we want, and there isn't this kind of after work has started, but before the work has started. That would really be our work ahead of time.
I would actually recommend probably, because that's going to be hours, right? It'll take hours for this group to sort of land on the level of detail that you'd like to see in the budget that would go out to the community. The time we have hours together is our retreat. This could be a great retreat agenda.
Yes, absolutely. We're way ahead of it by then. We're not in the waiting for those numbers. We'll have a plan. We could have a plan in place and go from there. So I will note that in here, but know that that'll be work we'll take on for our beginning piece of it. Allison?
I just offer on that it would be incumbent on each one of us to look at surrounding districts' annual reports so that we can see what other districts provide for information and go, oh, that'd be something I'd like to see, or okay, we don't need to see that. I did that for the neighbors to the north. And our other surrounding communities, that was, the comment that was made at the community informational meeting around the budget. And I think all of them had a very high level breakout, and it wasn't line by line by any means. It's a very simple one page. So I think that was sufficient for all of those other ones. But each of us should agree on which ones we want to look at. And then all of us should look through them and come up with our own list of ideas and things. And we're not going to reinvent the budget report that we do have, but just tweak it a little. Because there is a lot of hard work that goes into that. Thank you, Howard, and Katrina, and Patrick, and all of your staff that put that together. And Dawn for your help. And the principals for their updates on the schools too.
Okay, I've captured those notes. Any other comments? Liz?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation about the detail, but I also want to know that what we did ask for was for it to connect to the strategic plan, and that did happen. So I do think it's also worth noting that you did happen. So thank you for doing that.
Okay. Based on the information provided, do you find that the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable? All right. Does the data demonstrate the accomplishment of this interpretation? Okay.
Can I go with that?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that. You can live with it. All right, all those in favor of approving or accepting the monitoring reports for 2.8 communication and support to the board, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Next is a discussion item that we got a little tidbit about on our tour about the central office lease. So, Patrick.
Yeah, this is mostly, I just wanted to make sure that all the board members were aware of sort of our current situation with the central office lease agreement. Because I think it connects to the larger conversation that's going to be kind of picking up around facilities in general. And sort of unfortunate timing, but our lease is running out pretty soon in central office. And I think, we've had conversations about not really wanting to continue or to sign another 10-year lease and commit that sort of money and for that length of time to stay in the space we are. The space we're in is actually a nice space, but in terms of the investment of taxpayer dollars, a 10-year lease is not necessarily the greatest thing, especially a second 10-year lease that would put us renting for 20 years when we might have, it might be a better long-range planning to be in a property that we own. There are a lot of different, not a lot of different options. There are some options that exist for us. Some we've explored in the past as we have been anticipating this coming, and others that we're exploring currently. So some of the ones we've explored in the past were creating a space over what's referred to as the middle school wing, even though it's not just necessarily middle school that happens there, but that newer addition to the south side of the building here at Mount Aid. And that, with reinforcements needed in the structure and everything else, that was going to be about $2.5 million was the cost estimate to create that space overhead. That's a pretty high cost. We also looked at using the space where the White House is here on the corner. I think the plan was to knock that down and build something new there on that property. That was going to be about $2 million. So that also got to be pretty costly. So we're exploring some other options now. And talking with Kevin Harper, who owns the building we're in now, he's going to work up a price on what it would cost to buy the building we're in, which has additional square footage beyond central office. It's already retrofitted for the vast majority of our central office needs. That could become the most economical approach that makes sense, depending on what that price comes in at.
Would you ever become a landlord?
We may temporarily be a landlord. I think the plan would be to not remain a landlord. I don't think that's a desirable position for this board to be in, is to be landlord. There is currently, the tenants in our building right now that we're in, and we occupy the vast majority of the space there. Kevin Harper's offices are upstairs. There's I forget the name of the company, but they have an anemometer, sort of a wind tunnel, wind speed. I think they calibrate anemometers is what they do. They own or rent a small portion of that space. They're already planning to move out. Bristol Police Department are the other folks that are in there, and I think there are plans for them to be moving out. So there'd be additional space that we could have options for what to do with that. But we wouldn't necessarily be tenants in the long run. They'd have to honor their lease that those folks have, but I think the Bristol PD is the only lease that would extend beyond when our lease would end.
Kevin.
So when is the lease up?
So we have to be moved out of central office November 1st of 21.
And then what is the monthly cost? It's a triple net probably, isn't it?
So right now,
what's the total cost per month?
I think I don't know what the monthly breakdown is. We could do the math, but I think Howard calculated we're paying right now about $11 a square foot. So it ends up being a little over $40,000 in rent, plus there are utilities and plowing and a lot of shared expenses on top of that $40,000. That puts us more in the $60,000 to $65,000 range in total when you factor all of that in. Some of those are costs that we would have wherever we go. We were going to have to pay the light bill and plow and all that stuff. But $11 a square foot is the current rate. We met with Kevin the other day, and he made it really clear in a new lease, we're not paying $11 a foot anymore. It's going to go probably to $15 to $18 a foot. And then the current lease agreement has us increasing that rate by the consumer price index or a consumer price index, New England index, annually. So 1%, 2%, 3%, somewhere in there, depending on what that is.
So is he open to do a year-to-year or a 3 or 5 year lease?
Wasn't super open to that. It's certainly something we could go back and push a little harder on to see if he would go for that. But basically what he described was he has people interested in more space. So he doesn't feel he's in a position where he has to do that because he can get somebody else in for a 10-year lease if it doesn't sell.
Andrew.
Do you anticipate that with declining enrollment, any of the elementary schools will have enough space at some point that it could accommodate central office?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that probably exists now. The trick with that, and this is part of where the timing comes in, I would find it unfortunate if what we end up wanting to do as central office drives what we wish we could be doing with our school facilities. So as we're about to talk about what do we do with our 6 school facilities, if the decision was made ahead of that conversation that central office was going to be landing in any one of them, that could inadvertently be driving the conversation and may limit our flexibility with what we do with those facilities. So that's the timing piece is unfortunate. There's another challenge with being in a school, and I would say it exists more so in a secondary school than an elementary school, and more so in a bigger elementary than a small elementary school. But if we're located in a school building that has students in it, and that school goes into a crisis, and they're in lockdown, we as central office, who would typically be supporting that school in that crisis, are also in lockdown, and we're not able to support like we could otherwise. So that poses a challenge.
So from a safety standpoint, it doesn't make sense to be embedded in any of our schools.
Right, so it limits options in terms of what we do with facilities, and then it does pose it. And again, what that risk is, if we were in Beaman, which is a small school, we may be there for years and years and years and never find ourselves in that position, but it only takes one time and it becomes a really unfortunate thing, so.
Liz.
I thought about that a little bit, and it seems like in any case though, and there are lots of schools, like thinking of Winooski, where
I guess this is another situation to look at your neighbors and see what they do. But there would have to be police involvement. What information would get out somehow? So front desk training, maybe expanding the number of people that know how to handle the situation and do the emergency steps needed if something were to happen, because it just seems like it makes so much sense to use the space that we already have for it. And maybe it wouldn't have to be considered permanent if a different plan came up during the community engagement process with the schools. So it does seem.
I do think I think that the challenge is, and again, it comes down to like short-term and long-term, what makes the most sense. I don't think there's a situation where we could move into a school and not have to spend probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in retrofitting whatever space we're going into to make it suitable for central office. In terms of like an office space is just a different requirement and different structure than educational space. So, and obviously depending on where we go and what those fit-up costs would be, if in 3 years something different is going to happen based on the conversations we have as a community, that money may be money that didn't end up being well spent. So that's part of the challenge, is trying to think ahead in the future and what the decisions are going to be with our facilities and make a plan accordingly. But we don't have necessarily the luxury of time because our lease is up soon.
When does a new lease have to be signed by?
I'd have to get that. I don't know what the date is that we would have to notify. We've been really open with Kevin. He knows that we're seeking elsewhere, and he actually agrees. Yeah, you shouldn't continue paying rent someplace for a long time. Like it's not a great investment of the money. So he is fully in the know, and I think he's clear that we don't anticipate signing another 10-year lease at this point. But it's also clear we don't have a plan right now as to where we're going.
Is there a possibility of purchasing the building as you know and then maybe condoizing it?
I suppose anything's possible.
Just, if we didn't want to have the burden of the extra space, or trying to find a tenant for the extra space, or didn't need the extra space.
Well, and some of the extra space piece, again, not knowing what's going to happen with these conversations about our facilities, there's so many options that exist for us as a community, and what we want to do with 6 facilities that have a lot of space. I mean, the reality is, I think just looking from a capacity standpoint and historically how many students we've had in our buildings, our entire student body currently could fit in Bristol and Mountie. So that's the kind of space we're talking about. So that provides challenges, and that is an overhead cost that we have to sort of work with, but it also provides opportunity. And for me, I think it's best not to begin conversations with limited opportunity because of decisions we make about where central office is going to go. So I think if we had additional space at central office that we wouldn't need for central office, that space then becomes available and is part of the conversation as we're thinking about changes that are happening in those other places. So could space be used for, if we started a district-run preschool, that's space that could be available. I don't know, alternative programming of some sort. Like, so we could be creative in what the additional space in that building could be used for. It's nicely located right in the village of Bristol. So it's a possibility. Staying in that building, if we were to own it, adds options. Moving out into a school limits options.
But also, buying the building means you can also then, at some point, get rid of it.
Yes.
So if...
And that building, we wouldn't have to give back to anybody for $1. Like we could sell that building. Like all the other buildings we own right now go back to the town for $1.
Right.
Despite what condition they're in.
Right, so if, for instance, enrollment continues to do what it's doing, we've bought the building, you're in it for a while, but we do find that it makes more sense to consolidate into a facility.
Yeah, we can
unload the building that you're in.
And we're not necessarily limited to any time frame then.
Right.
Could be 3 years, could be 5 years, could be 20 years.
Yeah.
Allison.
This conversation brings up the point that we need to start working on a facility plan. And I know that is tied in with the strategic plan, but as someone at the budget informational meeting pointed out, we need to be talking about this. And we were talking about it with Act 46, just kind of on the periphery, but anticipating that we would be working on it kind of as soon as we became a new board. And yes, we haven't had the time to be able to do that, but the facilities and the use of them, I think, is a critical conversation that we need to have, and not on a month by month, maybe it makes it on the agenda, maybe it doesn't make it on the agenda process. We need a very structured process, I think, going forward.
Well, my understanding is
we have to make some of those decisions quickly. Because there are other things happening that you were aware of that are going to dictate some things that we do and some things we don't do.
But I'm thinking back to our October board meeting at Beaman when I presented my recommendation on a different approach to thinking about facilities and what we've taken in the past, focusing just on Mount Abe and just from a deficit perspective. And that was this process of let's really engage the community in talking about what do we want from our school system, and then how do our facilities help support that vision for what we want for our schools. I think the strategic plan helps influence our thinking about what we want from our schools because it gathered a lot of input from community and students and staff to be created. But I think it goes beyond the strategic plan as we think about community values and all that. But to start from that position of community values and big picture, and then with that clarity, how then do our facilities support that work? And that leads into facilities master planning. So to me, that's a little different than just looking at what the physical plant needs are in any of our schools. That's more about what grades do our schools operate? Do we operate all of our schools? Do we, there's a lot of conversation that I think is necessary to have as a community, and we have to land somewhere as a community. And I think, as I understand sort of where this is going, a couple Saturdays ago, that kickoff was to begin to build the structures and the relationships needed to have these meaningful conversations that lead to decisions on how we use our facilities, that then become part of this bigger plan, and we can start thinking about what needs to happen to get that plan off the ground. And it's going to take time. We unfortunately, I'm picking up on your sense of urgency, and I share that. And that won't happen quickly. We can't make that decision about how we use our 6 facilities quickly. It's going to take time.
Caution, you only had 0.5% of the voters at that meeting 2 weeks ago, too. So
Exactly.
You're potentially not getting a broad-based opinion.
Yep. That actually came up, I think, at that
Yes.
meeting, recognition of who's not here.
Right. And the task of getting out to a wider group of people is also part of it. So it takes a little longer to grow that out to more of the community. So we'll be hearing about this through, our maybe board discussion. We're also going to be hearing about it through the community engagement piece as well, as we gather more information. So it is stay tuned, even though we know Steve.
So I certainly appreciate the long-range master planning. I'd still appreciate an update on the facilities picture, just some nuts and bolts, how things are going. I noticed it was great hearing today, the things that you're seeing that are a priority that you got to fix, and I know Joel's been going around and looking at all the schools and trying to put together a list. So it still would be good to get an update on, because people ask all the time.
Yep. So we can talk a little bit about what's been done so far this year and what we're.
We have $1 million
planning to
in
do.
our budget. What are we doing with it?
Yep.
I don't know if I should say anything because I'm new and I feel like I'm clueless about the history of discussions and stuff. And I'm also not a native Vermonter, and I know schools are really important to towns. Like, I know that's kind of like a heart of a town. But as a parent, like, I'll gladly drive to Starksboro and send my kid there if we have to, like, close schools. But my alma mater in Pittsburgh, I know it's completely different because it's like the suburb of a big city, but they did a similar unification thing, and from the get-go, they went from like 7 to 4 schools. And there were bumps, and there were, you know, but now they're like really flourishing because I think kids aren't missing out on, you know, whatever, teachers and whatever. And like $80,000 refrigerators or whatever went bad, like if you don't have somebody like, I mean, it gives me a pit in my stomach, like I don't want to think about closing schools, but if we're looking at the reality of your, you know, your chart of decreasing numbers and stuff, but, so for whatever it's worth, but I do think it's important to have the discussion and think about the cringe-worthy things. So
We at least have to have the conversation. Where it lands, you know, the ideal situation, which will be a challenge to achieve, is that we work through this process and we arrive with great clarity about what the desire of the community is, everyone's voice included. How we get there will be a difficult task.
And I love the idea of the preschool, just to throw that out there. We lived in Franklin, Vermont, and they had their preschool in the school, and it was, I loved it. I loved it so much.
All right. We're going to keep on moving along. Board management and governance, we're a little behind schedule. Update for the negotiations was included in the packet. Same sort of statement, not much to say, more to come. Update from the Community Engagement Committee. Krista's not here tonight. There were about 50 people at the event on Saturday. It was a nice rounded mix. And Christopher Ross was there, so we got some coverage in the Addison Independent if you didn't see it. But it was a good discussion all around. I don't know anybody else who attended wanted to add, you know, your thoughts, but there was a lot of conversation.
Yeah, it was a lot of good conversation, but sort of people eager to do something. What are we going to do? We've talked a lot before. You've had meetings before, but what's this mean? What are we going to do about this? So all the emails we captured from folks who were at the meeting, we sort of broadcast out to those folks and said, so here's what you can do. We're going to start engaging people in the community around some central questions in sort of preparation for some forums that are held at each individual town. And we're going to have some help learning how to be facilitators for these forums. So in the effort to get more information, people were given a task to go get more information so they feel like they've got some traction and are engaged. So it seems pretty promising.
Great. Thank you. Liz, do you have some?
And I would say we're focusing on the feedback loop and communication, getting the information back out that we received and were given. And I think it was pretty exciting to see the Front Porch Forum post about the presentation we had tonight, because that almost spoke it was one of the top priorities of the whole group, and I think that everybody can see the value in having a place to bring your thoughts and concerns, whatever they may be, about what's going on with the school. So that was really neat to see that happen tonight, right after, or really throughout the whole time I've been on the board. People wanted a way to engage in a meaningful way that doesn't necessarily fit right here. And so I don't know if that is going to be an example for more councils or what that would be like, but I really, I think that is an exciting time for that to come up.
Okay. Update from the legislative update from VSBA.
The H39 passed in the Senate Education Committee. It's their amendment to H39, which requires newly elected boards of union districts created by the State Board of Education's merger. It orders them to determine whether they will merge on July of 2019 or July of 2020, and then depending on if they want to merge in 2019, they're able to retain certain grants, and then in 2020 they can apply to retain those grants. But the next step is that the House and the Senate need to come together and figure out a way to have a final draft of the bill, because right now they're pretty far apart.
Not a legislative update, but the VSBA has some ongoing training that there's a deadline for at the end of the week.
get the early bird registration
Registration.
rate, it's the end of the week. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the board chair superintendent joint training
right,
is
on the
happening.
15th.
Yeah.
and
Are you
then
gonna
the-
do that?
I'm not able to do that, but our retreat work was planned around some of the topics required in the law, so we are actually good on that because our retreat counts as some of that. But there is some Thursday and Friday meetings that if people want to join. It just, you can register on your own. We don't encourage you to register on your own. If you want to register, get in contact with Karen and let her know because of the process of going through the AP,
Yeah.
right?
It's easier for everyone, including yourself. If you want to go, like, don't spend your own money and then get reimbursed and it takes forever because our process just is what it is to, get approvals and all that stuff. So if you want to go, just email me and copy Karen, say, yes, I'd like to go to that Thursday and Friday in May. I didn't jot the dates down, but 16, 17, something like that sounds right.
Yep.
So if you're interested,
There's
just.
all kinds of online stuff.
Right, the same thing, if there's
Webinars.
stuff online or like somewhere else that has a fee and you.
So yeah, that's true for any training that you are interested in attending. Rather than register yourself, if you can register through Karen, basically, it's just easier for everyone.
Okay. All right. Our next item is an action item. So if we can get a motion to appoint student reps on the MAUSD board, then we can have a discussion.
So moved.
All right, Sarah? Is there a second?
Second.
Kristen? All right. It's unfortunate they're not able to be here because they have been very eager to be on the board. They've been emailing me over the last 2 or 3 months about coming to a board meeting, student reps, and being on the board. And it would be Bella, who was at the beginning of the tour.
Yeah.
She's one of the members, and Carly. And Carly both of them attended the forum on Saturday. So they are eager to join our group. If you all read through that student voice piece again, you can kind of get an idea. We'll have to do a little sort of orientation to kind of bring them up to speed about how things will work and everything. Kevin?
So we just establish a protocol on how to, I know select's probably not the right word, but acquire reps.
In the past, the Mount A board had reps, and they would put out a sort of like say, hey, we're looking for student reps to be on the board, and then they'd get letters, and they'd look through the letters, or have the board chair look through the letters, and typically it wasn't very many people, so what would happen is you'd have the candidates come and have a little interview and chat with them all, and then the board would make a decision about, who then. But if it was 3 people, we were pretty lucky. Most time it's just 2 people who are willing to do it, and we take them because we're glad to have them and we want them.
Reading the little booklet or whatever that thing was, it has this whole process about the school actually flushing up or encouraging or selecting or promoting. And I just wondered if all that was to be considered, or.
I think that's already happened, sort of. Ann Friedrichs and I bet Betsy are encouraging them to encourage them to reach out to Patrick and myself about joining the board. So I think there is some staff backing them here that's saying, hey, I think this would be a really great idea.
What grade levels they were, junior high kids?
Yeah.
They're both 8th graders.
Both 8th graders.
Well, Carly's not. Carly's a junior.
Junior, yeah.
Yeah,
Carly's
that's
older.
super.
So there were 2 that were willing to, and it'll.
And in the previous experience, did you have them vote?
They did vote, but they did not. The only thing they didn't really do was attend executive sessions, because we're typically talking sometimes about a student matter or personnel, so they didn't attend executive sessions. I think you don't think they voted?
I don't think so.
Okay, but they did weigh in. They definitely were part of the conversation, definitely. Okay, so maybe they didn't vote. But
Because I've heard
they did
of
weigh in.
instances where they were allowed to vote, and people thought that was crazy, but it actually was fine.
Oftentimes, what they weighed in had an effect on the
the
way
vote.
the adults voted.
Right.
So, yeah.
Because when Will Martin was on it, I don't remember him voting.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I
It's part of the
remember them
conversation,
weighing in
but
and
yes.
being a big part of the conversation.
exactly.
And that was huge.
But I mean, we should probably decide one way or the other, right? As a group, whether we're going to allow them to vote or not. Is that our decision to make?
I have to.
I think the first decision is,
Do you want
them at all?
Right.
According to that VBA pamphlet, they cannot vote because they're not legal voters or of age or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and they had a couple different ways, you could have them pre-vote, if you will, or do some straw poll thing and then have a vote, but there's a couple different methodologies.
You could understand their position, but not necessarily count it as, if it was, came down to counting members.
That's what happened like with Will and,
Elizabeth?
no, it was Porter's son. Porter Knight's son.
Oh, I'm sorry, William, yeah, Knight. No, not Bryson, the older one.
Yeah. I'm blanking on his name, but he often, it was very clear on what his position would be that the board knew, and it's, you know, and then there were other times where it was like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that, yep, and you could see where it had an effect on the adults as they were about to make their decisions.
So in many ways, they probably could vote with us unless there was a split decision on the board. Right then, if we had to count folks, then they couldn't be counted in that.
That sounds
Yeah.
Wrong.
informally
I
like the
think
way
if
I
they
would
weren't
do it.
elected by the townspeople.
Yeah.
I think that where that happens, the kids are actually, I mean, I would think that that would be an issue.
Right, yeah.
Because they're not elected officials.
Right.
Right. But they often had something worthwhile to say that affected.
It's very
what
valuable,
happened.
but I
Yeah.
can't imagine that was an issue.
Yep. All right, well, any more to talk about? And then we can start working through the process, the rest of the details and process as we go along. All right, all those in favor of student reps on the MAUSD board, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right, the next action item is to change the language in policy 2.7 to allow a multi-year agreements on a limited basis. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Steve?
A second.
Andrew? Okay. Discussion.
Second to that, sorry.
Andrew.
Okay.
Do you wanna?
no, I think the conversation earlier, I think, offered me some information, but if there's other thoughts that would be important for me to consider as I make a draft to bring to you at a future meeting, I'd love to hear it.
So typically multi-year contracts are for agreements with vendors who, to fulfill the contract, have to have a pretty intensive capital outlay. Is that typically?
Those are the circumstances that are coming to mind right now as I think about the current multi-year contracts that we have.
So basically, the exceptions are for sort of capital intensive. Okay.
Right.
So do we think an acceptable process would be basically review a list of those contracts once a year? Does that make sense? Just to be able to see what they are and see if they've changed over the...
Because you probably have a history of all of those contracts going back quite some time.
Yeah.
What those look like, who they were.
And again, it's a relatively small number, so we wouldn't have to be looking at multiple multi-year contracts going back years and years. So.
But I would think that would be enough transparency to understand what's going on and
it could be
modify the policy.
It could even be to include some language around. So obviously, if we're already in a multi-year contract, there's not a lot we can do to change that multi-year contract unless there's language that gives you an out. But it could be that we embed a process here that before we enter into any multi-year agreement with any vendor, that particular agreement comes before the board. That seems to me a more practical approach rather than every year looking at the list, knowing that if we have 5 vendors and 4 of them are still in mid-contract, we can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
But we could bring those multi-year contracts to the board before we enter into those.
But again, putting them in front of us once a year is just a refresher for everybody.
But this is what we have.
It's not necessarily that we would have to approve them or discontinue them or anything, but just shedding light on them once a year, just to.
Yeah, just sort of, here they are.
Here they
and
are.
This is the one
Here's
we'd
the
like to
current list,
renew
and
for
we might-
another 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, yeah.
Maybe for each of the contracts, how much longer the contract has, so that we have an idea of when it's coming up, just to have it in the back of our minds. Because we see the monitoring report once a year, so
Right, right.
we'd see the table once a year.
I'll just put it right in the report.
What's
Make it
that?
part of the report.
Right, that's what I think she was saying.
Yeah, part of the monitoring report, yeah.
Yeah, that could be just sort of a piece of evidence.
Like
Here
that's
are the
the evidence
multi-year
right there.
contracts.
Yep, yep, then the information's been provided. Okay. Any other comments? All right, all those in favor of the superintendent working on some language change in 2.7 to allow multi-year agreements on a limited basis, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, next action item is to authorize the superintendent to make hiring commitments.
So moved.
Andrew, is there a second?
Second.
Allison? All right, discussion. This is
Yeah, I can offer a little historical context here, just sort of the practicalities of this time of year in particular. So as we come into spring, this is a busy hiring time. And we have run into challenges in the past when sort of takes board action to officially hire someone. If we have a great candidate, they're probably a great candidate in more than one place. And when I offer a contract pending a board meeting that might be 3 weeks away, and they've got an offer from somebody else that's good now, it sometimes puts us in a challenging spot to get the best people, especially in the busy hiring time. So the year we're in now is the first year that this approval has come from the board to authorize me to make official commitments to people to be able to get the best people in prime time as things pop up. So that's what this authorization would be granting me. All of these people do eventually come before the board. So you'd still see them in a consent agenda at some point. But it would be post facto in terms of offering them a real commitment.
Allison.
Is this for the whole year, essentially, from now until?
Pretty much through the summer, because that's when
Right.
there will be things that pop up in the summer that we didn't anticipate, that we don't
Oh,
know
yeah.
about this spring, and
Yeah.
especially with the
September.
board not meeting. It used to be, the practice was
For
in
the
the
summer.
June meeting,
Yeah.
that the board would grant this authorization for the summer, so, because the board doesn't really meet in the summer, so it allowed me to hire folks. In thinking about it last year, it was unfortunate that it wasn't just a few months earlier, for the reasons that I've already described.
It's sort of bizarre that it's not standard practice. Since we're just going to approve it in a consent agenda anyway, why restrict your ability to hire at any point during the year? It's the means, you know, we're messing around with the means, I think.
But the law requires us to
Right.
hire
The-
and fire.
The board is required to hire, but we hire through the consent agenda, so we have no input on any of the hirings anyway.
So in practice, we've been authorizing this
doing it
advance.
anyway.
We've been authorizing this advance, ability anyway, so.
It's just that outside of this authorization, what, sort of ethically for me, knowing that it's the board's decision, I haven't been offering it, and it doesn't come up often for professional staff. Support staff more so mid-year. It's less frequent that a professional staff member is going to leave and we're going to hire that person full-time and not as a sub, right? Because long-term subs don't need to come before the board for authorization, but actual contracts for employment do. So it really pretty much only happens in, realistically, April, May, June, July, and August. Those are the months when this happens, and those are the months that I'm seeking for this authorization. Other times, it's not a big deal to wait a few weeks because we're in this sort of weird position anyway. But I think you're right. I mean, and that is in fact the purpose of a consent agenda anyway, really is for the board to act on things that by statute you have to act on, but through policy governance, our means
It's your work. So, and I don't really have a problem with it in general, because again, it's just like reminding us once a year of how the process works and nodding. That's how the process works. So I don't really have an issue with it. It's just, it seems odd.
Given the fact we have some coaches, interventionists, coordinators resigned, anybody who comes applying for those open positions, we don't meet until the end of April.
Right,
so.
right. Well, and in the past, before we did this, I remember Patrick calling and saying, what do? I got somebody great. I'm going to lose him if I don't do something in the next week.
Right. Can we somehow call an emergency board meeting just to approve this one person that we need to hire in a consent agenda? Like, it just became...
Because I don't want to lose him, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So-
A great inconvenience for the board to have to convene to approve a consent agenda item to hire somebody to make it official, and the person feels confident accepting.
The rest of this year, we haven't had very many hiring pieces in the consent agenda, but we have had some resignations going on, so.
Right.
Whereas now in the consent agenda, we're gonna see a lot more hires.
Right.
All right. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of authorizing the superintendent to make hiring commitments, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Next action item is to approve the superintendent's salary recommendation of 3% increase for employees not covered by the collective bargaining agreement or director's policy. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Allison? Is there a second?
Second.
Sarah? Any discussion?
This is already in the, sorry.
Allison?
This is already incorporated essentially into next year's budget, so
Correct.
we've voted the money in.
Yes.
Yeah, the money's there.
Okay.
And it's a typical practice.
Right.
That this is the way.
Generally speaking, so in an ideal situation, we have collective bargaining agreements settled, and whatever new money we land on or have landed on for a given year, that sort of same concept applies to other staff that aren't covered by the collective bargaining agreements. That has been past practice. We don't have a settled agreement yet, so this is what we're going with.
All right. I'm not hearing anything else. All those in favor of approving the superintendent's salary recommendation of a 3% increase for employees not covered by the collective bargaining agreement or the director's policy, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, our next item is to authorize the superintendent to renew contracts for the administrators and other employees not covered by the collective bargaining agreement or the director's policy whose contracts expire on June 30th, 2019.
So moved.
Allison?
Second.
Andrew? Discussion?
This is really just sort of similar to the other conversation, but a little different, being it's not new hires, but renewing of folks whose contracts are up.
Is that at 3% also?
Yeah, so they're in that, so everyone, it's the same group of people, basically. Everyone that's not covered by director's policy or collective bargaining agreement.
Does this include Patrick's salary?
Yep, it's all in there.
Administrator?
Liz?
Yep, so I support the authorization to renew contracts. But it's interesting, I guess, maybe not having participated in negotiations before. This is the moment I noticed last year. This is the negotiating moment with you and everybody not covered by the CBAs. This is that time when those sorts of conversations would happen. That just noticing that's all.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, we actually, I mean, this is sort of you reauthorizing your own contract, but we already have sort of, we're reviewed your
Right.
performance earlier. This isn't really
Right.
that moment necessarily.
Right, so my contract has been renewed from the action prior. Other contracts haven't yet, so the renewal piece is there. The salary piece for my contract and others here hadn't yet been determined, so this is the opportunity to do that. And I do have a lot more information that I can share in executive session because it's sort of sensitive in nature and it fits under the executive session that we have, so I can give a lot more detail there if folks are interested.
If I remember from the past, these raises were usually higher, but it seemed like we, what'd you call it, caught up to other districts a few years ago, and so now these are smaller for administrators than I recall in the past. Is that true?
I think the percent increase where we are right now is pretty comparable. I think it's fairly standard to what you see. Like, so anywhere from 2 to 4, I think for administrative contracts is what you might see in any given year. So this is kind of right in the middle of that. I think we have competitive salaries for our administrators, which I think is a great thing.
And I'm not used to hearing that, so that's different than 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. That you were like, we got to catch up, we got to catch up. So you feel like now we've caught up and we're so 3% is good instead of 5, 6, 7 every time and things like that.
I would say in particular with our smaller, more rural schools, we are very competitive. I don't think we're as competitive probably with our larger schools in our sort of urban Bristol area, but we're much better off than we had previously been.
I remember when I first got started on an aid board, you made some pretty significant jumps.
Yeah,
Get everybody up to a
To
level.
get everybody up to kind of a level playing field.
Toward the middle, well, this time in my first year, I made some pretty significant recommendations for shifting some things based on a new formula that took in some other factors because we were way under.
Right.
And so we made that adjustment at that time. So I think we're in a much better place. And now I think it's just sort of maintaining.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of authorizing the superintendent to renew contracts for the administrators and other employees not covered by the collective bargaining agreement or director's policy whose contracts expire on June 30th, 2019, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. The next item is an action item. It's around implicit bias training. So we need a motion to talk about it, and then we can determine the action.
So moved.
Steve? Is there a second?
Second.
Sarah. So this is on the agenda because it was on our board work plan. The action can be as simple as we're not taking any action, or we're taking action. So we want to do something about it and get some training, or hang on, we got enough going on, we need to wait a little.
Get a description, a paragraph or something.
Yeah, what is the?
It's been a while.
I think generally speaking, it's really about helping individuals and perhaps boards as a whole become self-aware about biases that they have that they don't even necessarily know that they have, and recognizing the impact those biases may have on decision making.
I think initially it was Allison who brought that up.
Yep. There was actually an interview this afternoon on NPR about a woman, with a woman who does those trainings, which I thought was quite serendipitous.
Is this something we can take on at the board retreat in the summer, have a focus on it and work on it then? We have a little more time, a little more.
How long is a typical implicit bias training?
That I don't know. We may discover if we do it at the board retreat, if we have 1 or 2 hours dedicated to it, that's probably not enough time, given the fact that we're all predominantly white, I'm assuming. That's my implicit bias. Based on characteristics, external characteristics of those around this table. So there might be more to it than that.
And some of it depends on the depth you want to get into, right? There are multi-day implicit bias trainings, and there are brief sort of couple of hour
Introduction to
Yeah.
implicit bias.
Andrew, sorry.
Yeah, so I like him, I mean, I like the concept of implicit bias, but just sort of as a construct, thinking about if we were going to do some bias training, how that would sort of be more grounded in board work. Like, how does that influence our work as a board versus just, you know, the IAT and the implicit bias test that people take and the sort of research that's been done about it, like, you know, that I taught about in the intro to psych class. It's really fascinating stuff, but like, how does it connect to us? How does it inform our board work? What does that look like? What are and I don't know if that exists, if someone comes in and says, here's how implicit bias works in school systems, or so that it feels a little more connected to what we're doing.
And I think that's exactly it, right? So as the person, I think, that will be making this ask of someone, you know, if this board wants this training, for me to be able to go to somebody and say, the board's interested in this training, and here's what they're looking to get out of it, and can you tie it to the board work? This is exactly the kind of information I would need to get this training scheduled, and thinking about how much time are you interested in investing, and to what extent do you want this to connect to board work. And
I think I'd almost want to know that, how it could do that, before I'd want to agree to investing in the time. You know, just understanding some examples of how it's been implemented by somebody knowledgeable. How do they connect that to boards in general and board work?
Well, not as a board member, but I work for the Howard Center in South Burlington schools, and they're having that this year for staff in relation to working with students. So that is a different presentation than we would probably need. So anyway, like I said, trying to have the staff confront that and reduce the amount of bias in their teaching and interaction with each other and the kids. So that's a different presentation. Maybe it isn't, but because we wouldn't be implementing it in that way.
So I'm just sort of thinking, maybe we want to have somebody who does this make a presentation to us first before we sign up for something.
So I was just writing, maybe the action is to get more info about what it involves. Maybe that's our action that we take on this, to get more information on it and then come back for a more in-depth discussion. Would everybody agree with that? Okay. Okay. So our action regarding implicit bias training is to get some more information. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
can I offer how I interpreted that action? So if I can make sure that
Nobody got the job title.
What I'm wondering if satisfies that action is, so Moncton actually had someone come to Moncton Central School and offer an implicit bias training. I could reach out to that person, ask them to sort of give me a proposal on how they might offer support to this board in thinking about implicit bias as it relates to the work of a board. And then they could maybe say how much time they think it would take to support you in that way, and I could bring that to this board, and you can say, yeah, that makes sense, let's add it to the retreat agenda, or yeah, that makes sense, let's fit it into an evening, or no, that doesn't make sense, and we'll move on to something else.
I just have one quick, and I'm not looking for a big discussion, I'm just looking for a thumbs up so I have a clue what everybody thinks. And I haven't even said anything to Patrick, but Patrick and I are starting to look at the April agenda and we have to do Patrick and I have to do a new board member orientation. And so in looking at that and considering some of the feedback I heard at the community forum and some other feedback that I received from board council, I'm kind of in the back of my head wondering, we were going to try and fit it into next month's agenda, but as we build that agenda, I'm wondering if that agenda builds too big. Is anybody opposed to another night strictly on a mini retreat idea, not a business meeting, but a mini retreat that we could do a board member reorientation and then do a couple of other pieces of policy governance work and some training from the board council as well. Is anybody opposed to another meeting if we have so much content that? No. Okay. Okay. All right. Then we'll work on it and see what we can do. And when we decide to add another date, we'll send out. Sarah.
I have a report thing that is in a later month.
Yeah.
If you want it sooner, you let me know. If you want to roll that into that night.
Oh, okay.
With another monitoring report.
Is that, which one are you doing it?
No, I started it, but I can't remember which one it is, but it's for May or June.
Okay, well, we'll see what it looks like when we start putting an agenda together with all that we have, and then, but I just wanted to have an idea whether people would be like, this is too much for one night, or we should, if you're just as willing to do like the retreat work, a mini retreat, not the whole day, just a couple hours, 3 hours. So
last year, didn't we? Like a mini retreat, didn't Val Gardner?
that was a couple of.
I don't remember if that was last year before. Last year we might have done a budgeting.
Yes.
Like early on.
Had mini thing.
But just a mini that would be purely board education is what I'm thinking.
It's just recognizing the challenge of, a 2-hour training on top of like tonight's meeting.
Right.
I was going to say.
Yeah, like.
Even this agenda.
Yes, yeah, well, all right. Okay, so now we're moving down to our executive session, which we will need. So, and I received some feedback about the way we're going into executive session. So, the feedback from board council was that we need to do 2 separate motions when we're going into executive session around the topics that require determination that premature knowledge puts the district at a substantial disadvantage. So that has to be the first motion. Then, given that information, we make the motion to go into executive session, the next motion. So tonight's executive session is around Title I, VSA 5, Section 313A1B, Labor Relations Agreements with Employees, A1D, and grievances, A3, evaluation of an employee, and A1E, pending litigation. So that was also another piece we learned from board council. If you want to talk about all those things, you have to list all those things in the agenda. So the titles that require a determination of premature knowledge are around labor agreements with employees, grievances, pending and probable civil litigation or a prosecution to which the public body is or may be a party of. So, under those, the grievance, the labor agreements, and the pending litigation, having a conversation in public session would be a disadvantage because currently we are in the middle of a contract negotiation. We would be possibly talking about some of our plans as we move forward in negotiations, and having the other parties who are part of that hear that might affect our ability of back and forth. So that's one place where it'd be a disadvantage. Obviously, the civil litigation, if we're in the middle of a possible lawsuit, we really don't want to be talking about that in public session, and then having that anything we said inadvertently used against us. So that would be one. Labor agreements, my understanding of how that would be a substantial disadvantage is an employee that we're talking about may consider that an evaluation in a public session and then be violating, I believe, labor laws to evaluate an employee in public session. So given that, I would entertain a motion that those subjects would cause general premature knowledge of those topics would put the district at a disadvantage. Somebody, Andrew.
How would you like that worded?
That's
I'm
good luck.
very confused.
Good luck. I can hand you the open meeting law, and if you...
So you want the first motion to just say a motion to enter executive session?
The first one would be a determination of premature knowledge, putting the district at a substantial disadvantage around grievances, pending litigation, and contracts, and then employee relations was determined. And that was, so I have Andrew made that, move that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Steve, second. All right. All those who are in agreement that that would put the district at a substantial disadvantage, and please don't ask me to say them all again, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. I'm going to get cheat sheets from board counsel about exactly what it has to say.
I was going to say, you might want to have that pre-typed up.
Yep. All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Now, given all that knowledge and the other subject that doesn't require that we have premature knowledge, which that's on this page, we'd like to move to go into executive session at 8:42, and invite Patrick and Katrina and Travis Park, Katrina Zanapoli and Travis Park to join us. Steve Rooney and Andrew. All those in favor of going into executive sessions and inviting those three in with us, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Okay.